Welcome to today's edition of Daytime Dialogues. It is truly a pleasure and an honor for me to welcome a friend of many, many years, HaRav David Stav. But he's not just a friend, he's also a great leader within Klal Yisrael. He's the chief rabbi of a city of Shoham. Everyone knows where Shoham is, even though they may not know Shoham because it's right next to the airport. It's an important city there. And he's the chairman of the Zohar organization, which has done so much good for Klal Yisrael. And I understand he's also the Rav of the Tnuat Noar of Ezra, which he and I have never spoken about. Ezra, for those who are not as familiar, is a religious Zionist youth movement that was associated with the Poalei Agudat Yisrael many years ago, and PAI existed in the same way, but it's a very important organization as well. And I could go on and on, except to say that he is one of the people who is a mover and shaker in the Jewish world. And so, Rav Stav, thank you so much for joining us today.
Shalom to everybody. Shalom, Rav Matenki. Thank you for inviting me to this discussion. And I would like to share with you some thoughts a bit about Zohar and how this organization today is very, very relevant to what's going on in Israel today. I will start with Zohar, but in order to explain what Zohar is doing, I have to give a short introduction. In Israel, unlike America, there is a connection, a huge connection between state and church. Actually, there is no civil marriage in Israel, and every secular couple, just like religious couple, observant couple, has to get married through the rabbinate. That's one of the ways that the state of Israel is defined as a Jewish state, by the fact that marriages and divorces are done through the religion people are affiliated with. Now, basically, I'm very, very much in favor of that, because this guarantees a kind of an umbrella for Klal Yisrael, for all the Jews that will get married under this umbrella of the chief rabbinate. And eventually, it will guarantee one united nation for generations. What's the problem? The problem is that A, many Israelis are secular and don't want to get married this way. B, many of them feel that there are a lot of obstacles that are put in front of them when they want to get married, such as we have in Israel 1.5 million immigrants that have arrived from the former Soviet Union in the last 30 years. Now, all these, forget the non-Jewish people that need to convert. Let's talk about those who are halachically Jewish. Still, they have to prove that they are Jewish. Now, how do you prove that you're Jewish if you don't have a ketubah, if you don't have the halachic certificate that approves that your parents or yourself got married in a halachic Jewish way? Now, all of the Russians don't have this document, because under the communist regime, there was no Jewish marriage and no halachic marriage. So all of a sudden, the average Israeli couple that wants to get, I'm talking about the ones that do want to get married, all of a sudden, when it comes to register to the rabbinate, he discovers that he has to go through a process that, even if it will be the the friendliest process, still it's alienating for him, because he feels that he's Jewish and he doesn't have to prove it to nobody. Here he has to go through a very, very difficult process of proving his halachic Jewish status. So that's point B. Now, if you add to that the Chilul Hashem, the disgracing of the name of God in many occasions, because rabbis didn't show up in time, rabbis charged a lot of money, and etc., many rumors and stories that were very, very much, gave a very bad name to the religious marriage. We found ourselves in a situation where more and more Israeli couples don't want to get married in a halachic way, but furthermore than that, they don't want to hear anything from Judaism, and that's the worst issue about that. More and more secular people feel that Judaism is not relevant for them. We in Zohar, after the assassination of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in 1995, we understood that we ought to do something about it, because otherwise we'll be divided to 2 or 3 or 4 nations, and this will be a disaster for the Israeli society and for the state of Israel. So we started a small project called Chatunot, Meizam Chatunot, the flagship of Zohar, to get married through our rabbis. We actually had 3 conditions to whoever who wants to participate in this project. A, you have to show up in time. B, you have to invite the couple to your home before the wedding. C, you are not allowed to charge money. Now, when I know Rabbi Matankin, I guess when he hears the 3 demands, he asks himself, wait a minute, what's new about it? Every American typical rabbi, I guess, is committed to these 3 values. And I don't know an American rabbi that will not invite the couple at least once, maybe twice, maybe more than that, before he officiates their wedding. That's not the case in Israel, because unlike America, despite the fact that all couples must get married through the rabbinate, but almost none of them has a rabbi, because none of them is connected to a community. First of all, most of the shuls in Israel don't have a rabbi. B, 99% of the secular people are not visiting shul, not even in Yom Kippur. So forget being connected to a community on a weekly basis or on a daily basis, but on a yearly basis. So when do they meet the rabbi in the first time? They meet him in the night of the wedding. By the way, in most of the time, the rabbi himself didn't know what couple is going to marry, because he gets a list from the rabbinate. Maybe he switches with another colleague a day before or a week before. He has no connection to the couple. We started with that project, which had a tremendous good reputation. Today, we perform every year 4,000 weddings a year. But once we realized that the thirst for such Judaism was so strong, we started to expand our activities to different areas. We expanded to bar mitzvah programs, to helping Russians to prove their Jewishness. By the way, we help Americans as well, North Americans and South Americans. We started to deal with a lot of areas where secular people meet the religious establishment, in burial, in other areas of Jewish life. And we started to create a kind of alternative to the familiar establishment, which works along with the rabbinate, but provides the services in different approach, in a different way. That's basically what Zohar is doing.
So when you say you work with the Rabbanut, for example, is it because you are also a chief rabbi of Shoham and therefore part of the Rabbanut structure, and it's able to work through you?
Look, I would say it I'll put it this way. There are issues that actually we are the long arm of the rabbinate. When we perform weddings, when we give bride counseling, when we help the Russians to help to prove their Jewishness, actually most of the people that come to us are sent to us by the rabbinate, because the rabbinate doesn't have the tools, unfortunately, to deal with these issues of helping the Russians to prove their Jewishness. So there are projects that we do with the rabbinate. There are projects that we do and the rabbinate has no connection to them. There is one project that is perceived as something that works against the rabbinate, but I will not go into the details. But
So
basically, what?
No, so for instance, you mentioned you do about 4,000 weddings a year through the rabbis who are associated with Zohar. How many weddings do you think take place in Israel besides the Haredi community?
It's not what I think, it's what I know.
You know. Okay.
So, first of all, I think people have to understand, all the weddings that we perform are registered by the chief rabbinate. We're not talking about private organization that is doing something without the system. We are actually we are registering couples on behalf of the chief rabbinate. Now, how many weddings are done in Israel. We know the numbers. The numbers today are that every year they are registered in the rabbinate around 33,000 weddings a year. Among this number, about between 15 to 17,000 marriages are done to Haredim and to religious couples, which means that about 15,000 couples are getting married secular. It's not a high number because in previous years we had already 37 and 38 and almost 40. It's a kind of a tendency less and less to get married through the rabbinate, less and less to get married at all, and less to get married through the rabbinate, because if from 2 years ago we were 37 and this year we had 33, and the population keeps on growing, and the percentage of Haredim that are getting married is also growing in around these numbers, it means that basically less and less secular people are getting married, and that's a disaster. We want them all to get married through the rabbinate, because otherwise their kids, their descendants will not be recognized as Jews, and this is a real pity.
Now, in recent, with the rise of the new government and the new Sarah Datot, Matan Kahana, there have been a number of changes that have that are proposed to take place or may already be taking place in terms of conversion and other aspects of what the Rabbanut had done in the past. I know when I was speaking with him early in the summer with Minister Kahana, your name came up and Tzohar's name came up very often, because he views many of the proposals of Tzohar are the proposals that he wants to follow. Have those proposals of how conversions are managed and other aspects and kashrut, have those changed already in Israel? Is it entered into law?
Yeah, it's a very important question. Let's divide the question to two, because there is one issue, kashrut, and the second issue is conversion. The reform of the kashrut has passed a few weeks ago. It will be implemented in 2 stages. First stage is going to be open January 1st, which means in 2 weeks from now, 2.5 weeks. And I will explain in a minute what does it mean. And the second stage will be implemented 1st of January 23. Now, what does this reform say? On the first stage, it says that from January 1st from January 22, there will be a kind of a competition between the rabbinates, which means that, for instance, the rabbinate of Shoham will be able to provide kashrut services to stores or restaurants or factories that are not in the region of Shoham, and vice versa. The rabbinate of Tel Aviv will be able to provide kashrut in the region of Shoham. What's the idea of this? That's stage 1. What's the idea of this? The idea is that there were many complaints against rabbinate that worked as monopoly, and they felt that they could demand crazy demands, financial demands and other demands from the businessmen, from the owners of the restaurants, with no justification, because they had no other choice, because they were actually captive audience by the like hostages by the local rabbinate. Now, once there will be a competition, the rabbi, let's say of Shoham, let's speak about myself, I will have to think 5 times before I demand high demands of different types of demands, because I know that the restaurant will have an alternative. If I will exaggerate with my demands, whether they are financial demands and other demands, he will go to another rabbin. So that's the idea of stage 1. Stage 2 is much more meaningful. Stage 2 actually says that the local rabbis will be able to continue to provide kashrut, but there will be corporations of kashrut that will have the same authority to give kashrut. I will take each one of you, give a look at your wine bottle that you bought from Israel. Even let's take Yarden. It's a lovely wine, And if you give a look at the stamp, you will see at least 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 stamps. The rabbinate, the OUP, if it's kosher for Pesach, but that's Bet Yosef, but that's a Dachari. Now the question is, why does the restaurant has to pay to 2, 3, or 4 supervisions? If they want rabbinate, let them pay to the rabbinate. If they want OU, let them pay to the OU. Why do they need multiply approvals? The answer is that the law demanded that each one will use the rabbinate, and only in addition to use corporations of kashrut. Now the law changed and said, no, if you want to take the OU, take the OU. If you want to take Bet Yosef, take Bet Yosef. You don't have to pay twice. Now, each one of these corporations will have to stick to a certain regulation that will be transparent, and there will be somebody, either the chief rabbinate or another way, but basically the chief rabbinate, that will make sure that the regulations of the chief rabbinate are implemented by this corporation. So let's say the OU wants to give kashrut on Yain Yarden or Yekev Psagot, winery of Psagot, or winery of Shiloh. So then there will be criterions, and the OU will say, okay, I obey to the rules. So that's the second stage of the reform. Now about conversion.
Oh, before you get to conversion, so part of the problem with that, in the United States, for example, we have open competition, and we have more hechsherim, even though they may not be larger, but there are more hechsherim that we don't rely on than those that we do rely on. And the reason why those hechsherim that we don't rely on can stay in business is because there are people who just don't know any better. And they're willing to use them because they say kosher means kosher. Like in the olden days, they would just put a K on a label. It meant nothing. But then people would say, if it's got a K, I'll rely on it. People who are more informed will use a better ashkacha. And so what happens in the United States, while there's a lot of good coming out of the competition, there's also a lot of challenges and a lot of bad. What's to protect that from happening in Israel? Or we know, Americans will say we rely on certain communities and their rabbanut in certain communities more than we will on others in terms of kashrut. They have a better system. They have more people working.
So let me respond to that. First of all, unlike America, each one of the corporation has to be led. A, it's going to be supervised by the chief rabbinate. B, it has to be led by rabbinic authority. C, they have to be very transparent about their regulations and the way they are implementing their regulations. And they will be supervised. The corporations, unlike America, without mentioning names, I think we all know about what you're talking about, without mentioning names, nobody could supervise. It goes by from word to mouth. This is better, this is less. By the way, I'm not sure about what the comment that you made about the reliability of the rabbinate. I mean, you have to realize that today, all Haredi people, none of them relies on the rabbinate. None of them. Because, and I cannot blame them. Many, let's say, Haredi Leumi, many right-wing people in the Zionist movement do not rely as well. As a matter of fact, just for your information, over 40 cities in Israel don't have a rabbi. So for instance, when you come to Tel Aviv, and I hope COVID will disappear, and please God, you'll be able to come soon. When you come to Tel Aviv, you have to know there is no rabbi in Tel Aviv. So when you eat from the kashrut of the rabbinate of Tel Aviv, actually you eat from the kashrut of an officer, a political appointment, the head of the religious council, with no rabbi for the last 5 or 6 years. Rabbi Lau is retired many years ago. The same thing applies to Haifa. The same thing applies to Rehovot, to Rishon LeZion, to Ashkelon. I could give a long list of. So the situation today is quite complicated. If there were not thousands of complaints against the rabbinate, and it ended up with the decision of the Supreme Court that the entire system of the rabbinate is not legal. As a matter of fact, unlike America, I hope unlike America, the supervisor gets paid from the owner of the restaurant, which Moshe Feinstein wrote in a tshuva that is halachically unaccepted, because he should not get paid by his employee, by the restaurant. He should get paid by the corporation. And the Supreme Court in Israel said, this is illegal, what's going on here, because he cannot supervise something that he gets paid from the second hand. Anyway, this is what's going to happen. I cannot tell you if it's good or bad. I can tell you that it shakes the boat. A lot of things will change because of that. Let's dedicate a few words to conversion. The bill is still in writing. So we believe that within 2 weeks, there will be a first call in the Knesset. You know, every bill in Israel has to pass 3 calls. 3 times the Knesset has to vote on that bill. And between the calls, there are a lot of sessions in the committees. I believe that within 2 or 3 months, the law of conversion will pass. It has different versions. The idea is the following. The idea is to allow local city rabbis to carry out conversions. Today, the conversions in Israel are done only by the Beis Din of the chief rabbinate and a few teams of rabbinic courts. And the idea is that local rabbis will be able, as it was the situation 30 years ago, they will be able to carry out conversions. That's the formalistic aspect. What is the essence of the dispute? And there is a dispute about it. The essence of the dispute is the question of converting minors in Israel. You know, I need to explain it. I have 2 minutes, Rabbi Matenki?
Yes, of course.
So in Israel today, we have around 500,000 immigrants that arrived to Israel that are not Jewish. Among them, we have around 100,000 people between the ages of 0 and 18 that are not Jewish. Another 100,000 between the ages of 18 and 30, 35, around. Now, every year, we have another 5,000 minors that are born. These are the numbers. These kids are going to learn with our kids in the schools, in the army. They're going to serve together in the army. They grow up as Israelis. And you have to understand, for a secular Israeli, he couldn't care less whether the rabbinate recognizes his Judaism or doesn't recognize. For him, he's a part of him. He doesn't see himself more or less Jewish than him. By the way, most of them, if not all of them, will celebrate Pesach and Yom Kippur, will fast or will go to Shul and Yom Kippur, whatever they will do, just like their secular neighbors. The question is, should we make an effort to convert the kids before they arrive to the age of Bar Mitzvah in order to make the process of converting much easier, halachically speaking? Because when you convert adults, the demand of accepting all mitzvot, of accepting the Jewish laws with all the considerations of that, with all the ramifications of that, is very meaningful. Now, most of the Russians do not want to lie and do not want to convert because they have no intention to be frum. So the option that we think about is converting kids. This is the dispute. There are many rabbis that are in favor of that. There are many rabbis that are against that. That's the dispute. But the formalistic aspect of this dispute is the conversion of city rabbis.
Our time is running out, but I don't want to leave without something that was in the news this week regarding Bennett's government deciding not to move forward with what is referred to as the Ezrat Yisrael, the egalitarian platform that was supposed to be built by the Kotel and by the excavations there. And it was reported in the press that you also were not in favor of the Ezrat Yisrael. Can you give us your perspective on whether or not this is a good thing to happen or not?
Well, first of all, I didn't speak a word to the press about Ezrat Israel in the last year or two. So I don't know what quotation was taken from me, because I never, not never. Look, basically the solution of Ezrat Israel is a solution that I don't want to say that I'm one of the fathers of this solution, but I'm one of those who believe that this is the right way to solve this problem. The debate today about Ezrat Israel is not about the place. It's not even about the accessibility of the place, and it's not even about the budget to innovate the place and to build all the facilities that are needed. That's not the story today. It's the budget is there and the platform is built. That's not the issue. The debate today is about one thing. Who will be in charge on that place? Will it be taken from the rabbi of the Kotel, and will be given to the Reform and Conservative rabbis in Yerushalayim, or will it stay under the responsibility of the rabbi of the Kotel? That's the essence of the debate. Now, it's not about the place of praying. It's not about nothing. It's only about a symbolic. I don't want to undermine the symbolism of this, because if the government will give it to the Reform rabbis, it means for the first time that the word Reform rabbi is mentioned in any Israeli official document, because until now they were never recognized as something that exists. So I guess that Naftali Bennett wanted to escape from the political outcome of such a decision, and that's why he decided to postpone it in half a year, if I understand correct what he was doing. But I'm not involved in, is not involved, and I'm not involved in this. I'm deeply involved in the conversion and the kashrut issues, but in the story of the Kotel, I'm not involved at all. I leave something to others.
There is a lot still to do within those areas, and we haven't even touched about Sohar's efforts on Tikkun Leil Shavuot, where thousands of people come.
Purim, Bar Mitzvah, burial, ethical center. I could talk to you hours, but let's leave something to another opportunity.
For another opportunity, and I want to thank you. Our time is up, and I want to thank you for your time and thank you for all of your efforts. I look forward to seeing you in person again very soon, Rav Stav, and hopefully maybe have you come back to visit us at Congregation KINS again, as you have in the past.
Be'ezrat Hashem, looking forward, waiting to your invitation. B'simcha.
Have a wonderful evening, and thank you for everything. Bye-bye. Shalom.
Bye.